Hello. On behalf of the U.S. Mission to the Republic of France and the Principality of Monaco, sincere thanks to Jean-Guillaume de Tocqueville for inviting me to join you today. I would also like to thank Laure Mandeville and all the participants who are joining us today. And I'm pleased you will hear from General Mattis later. Yesterday, you spent the day hearing about Putin's unprovoked, unjustified, and premeditated war in Ukraine. Today, I'll give the U.S. perspective, both on what has transpired and on what our strategy will be going forward. I will first highlight the unprecedented cooperation and timely information sharing between the United States and our European allies and partners. In the lead-up to the invasion, our swift declassification of satellite imagery shone a light on the false flags that Russia intended to use as its pretense for an attack. This information sharing also allowed us to collectively prepare. As a result, when Putin circled in, we moved swiftly and with common purpose to condemn Russia's actions and to implement unprecedented economic and political sanctions. Our collaboration as allies and our transparency with each other are essential going forward as we seek to counter the disruptive role Russia plays in the information space. Putin uses disinformation as a weapon to undermine trust in what is fact and what is fiction. As U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken put it, the Kremlin is engaged in a full assault on media freedom, access to information, and the truth. Putin attempts to justify brutality and violence by distorting the truth behind the human cost of his actions and by lying blatantly to his own citizens. His twisting of the facts and the outright lies are not just a cover-up for his actions in Ukraine, but they are a tool to protect his power. Because the most dangerous thing to an autocracy is a free press that exposes lies and dispels dangerous myths and false narratives. That is why we must do all we can to combat disinformation by bolstering independent media outlets and supporting media freedom. Russia's blatant disregard for international norms is sending a clear message to other nations who nurse similar regional grudges and expansionist ambitions. China is also challenging the rules-based international order that has long been the foundation of security and prosperity for Americans and people around the world. Similarly, Russia's actions in the economic sphere have weaponized energy and food. They pose a clear threat to Europe's energy supplies and even threaten to disrupt global food security, placing almost 40 million people at risk. But here again, the U.S. and Europe are united in our response. The United States and our partners are committed to strengthening energy security, enhancing the resilience of global food security, and tackling the climate crisis. Russia's aggression has indeed only strengthened Europe's resolve to speed up the transition to clean energy. President Biden's ban on the import of Russian oil, gas, LNG, and coal will further deprive President Putin of the economic resources he needs to continue his war of choice. And on May 8th, the entire G7 committed to phasing out or banning the import of Russian oil. We also applaud the steps European allies and partners are taking to reduce their reliance on Russian oil and natural gas by diversifying their sources of energy and reducing consumption in line with our shared climate goals. To fight food insecurity, Secretary Blinken chaired a special UN Security Council meeting on May 19th to mobilize the world community to overcome disruptions in grain delivery. We have worked intensively with the EU to make sure Ukraine can export its critical harvest. And on June 28th, G7 leaders committed to $4.5 billion to combat food insecurity, including $2.7 billion in new U.S. government funds to support efforts in over 47 countries and regional organizations. We have also worked to combat a Russian-generated narrative, which obscures Russian responsibility for this war and seeks to blame the U.S. and EU for coming to Ukraine's assistance. So, what must we as Western democracies do next? How do we as a transatlantic alliance address disinformation, respond to the urgent threat autocracies like Russia pose to the international order? How do we help Ukraine continue to defend its territory while strengthening the security architecture that keeps us all secure, prosperous, and free? What is clear is that we cannot accept or acquiesce to Putin's assault on our core democratic values and institutions. Doing so would signal an end to the rules-based international order and open the door to aggression elsewhere, with catastrophic consequences for our regional and global security. We will not stand for that. By attacking Ukraine, President Putin sought to divide the United States and Europe. But we are stronger and more united than ever. President Biden said, "America's goal is straightforward. We want to see a democratic, independent, sovereign, and prosperous Ukraine with the means to deter and defend itself against further aggression." To achieve this, we must continue to impose crippling sanctions on Russia, the toughest ever imposed on a major economy. We must continue to bolster NATO's deterrence and defense on the eastern flank. And we must continue to provide robust military and other assistance to Ukraine to help it defend its territory and its freedom. The United States will also continue to support Ukraine's efforts to achieve a negotiated end to the conflict and to bolster accountability mechanisms to ensure those responsible for war crimes and other atrocities are held to account. As evidence of our commitment, President Biden signed a $40 billion aid package for Ukraine on May 21st. From the beginning of this war, our country has been very clear that we would do nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. This means that we will not pressure the Ukrainian government, in private or public, to make any territorial concessions or act against their interests as a sovereign, democratic nation, one that has the right to determine its own future. The Kremlin believed it could easily overthrow the Ukrainian government, but President Zelensky and the democratically elected government of Ukraine are still firmly in place. Russia's forces lost the battle for Kyiv and have had to retreat and refocus elsewhere in the country. Our transatlantic unity, strength, and commitment are securing a democratic future across the region. The entire NATO alliance stands against Russia's aggression, as evidenced by the historic decisions our leaders took in Madrid. With Sweden and Finland set to join the ranks of NATO allies, we are stronger and more united than ever. Our presidents have left no stone unturned in their diplomacy, and they have never shied away from our collective commitment to securing a Europe that is whole, free, and at peace. We warned Putin that the transatlantic community would respond to Russian aggression, and we have. The scope and scale of our response to this authoritarian threat has been unprecedented and proves our institutions are up to the task. And I should note that it was under France's tireless presidency of the European Union that the European Council reached its historic decision to grant Ukraine and Moldova candidate status. These are just a few examples of our unity, strength, and commitment as we forge a better future for the generations to come. Sadly, we don't know when this war will end. But we do know this: Ukraine will continue to fight for its freedom and independence. And we will continue to stand united with Ukraine for as long as it takes. History has shown that Europe and America are stronger when working together to face the world's toughest challenges, which is why I want to close today by reflecting on another moment in history, one that happened right here in France 75 years ago, when democratic nations stood together in pursuit of a shared future, one of peace and prosperity. I'm speaking, of course, of the Marshall Plan. In reflecting on that historic moment when the Marshall Plan was born, Henry Kissinger wrote, "Every generation requires a vision before it can build its own reality. But no generation can rest on the laurels of its predecessors. Each needs to make a new effort adapted to its own conditions." The Marshall Plan and the post-war institutions it engendered have shaped our world today. But as Kissinger wisely noted, we cannot rest on those laurels. Marshall's vision of international cooperation and European peace and unity are more relevant than ever before, as these values are currently under threat. We must reaffirm the lessons of that period, reinforce the institutions our ancestors created, and continue to show a unified response and unwavering resolve to confront those who seek to undermine our hard-won gains. The transatlantic unity shown in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine is another example that Marshall's vision of a vital, united, and engaged transatlantic alliance remains as strong as ever. Thank you.